Today, I want to talk to you about cinematography. 2007 was a great period of modern cinema, especially for the Western genre, giving us two all-time classics: No Country for Old Men, directed by the Coen brothers, based on the book of the same name by Cormac McCarthy. The leading trio of Javier Bardem, Tommy Lee Jones, and Josh Brolin, all excellent in this chilling adaptation, with arguably one of my most favourite scenes in cinema, the coin toss. The other film we got was There Will Be Blood, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, loosely based on the book by Upton Sinclair, titled Oil. The trio this time, Daniel Day-Lewis, Paul Dano, and Kevin J. O'Connor. What most people remember from these two films are the performances, the lead from Daniel Day-Lewis as Daniel Plainview, and the supporting role by Javier Bardem in No Country for Old Men as Anton Chigurh. Not the cinematography, though, which is what I want to talk to you about today. Roger Deakins has long been denied his Oscar for Best Cinematographer, even going into 2007 for his nomination for No Country for Old Men. He was already nominated 4 times before and hadn't won yet. He did finally win it, though, in 2017 after 13 previous nominations. It seemed that he would have to win eventually at some time. His craft is immaculate, being one of the pioneers in digital filmmaking and using digital cinematography, and having a real passion about what it can offer to cinema. His silhouette shots rival any frame in cinema produced, especially those in Sicario and Blade Runner 2047. Many thought he should have won earlier, specifically for No Country for Old Men, but he did lose, and he lost to Robert Elswit, who was the cinematographer for There Will Be Blood. Subjective decisions on who should win awards, if you even think about the award ceremonies anymore, if you care about it, is still difficult to understand and to fully compute. However, the cinematography in There Will Be Blood is truly incredible and does deserve to be praised, so we'll be going over some of its best bits today. What primarily stands out during the beginning of the film, especially during its opening silent sequence, are its long extended takes where the camera is slowly moving around the sets, horror-like in its pace as it captures the slow progression of the oil industry. As the men discover oil and start to extract it out of the ground, the way the camera moves, slowly revealing each part of the process, makes it seem like they're discovering something unnatural, uncovering some horror artifact that should never be uncovered. We get this strong impending sense of doom as the men start to extract the oil from the ground. It creates a very nervous and intense atmosphere. We start to question whether this oil will eventually bring success, or will it start to eat and destroy the men, exposing their greed, which is a major part of the film, and the way that it's captured during the beginning intimates this very much. When we move over to the first dialogue scenes, he frames the conversations in 2 very different ways. The first is primarily concerned with focusing the audience's attention on specific characters at a time. This is the scene where Paul goes to visit Daniel. He does this through clever blocking and slowly revealing more characters as the scene progresses and gets more complex. This use of blocking represents the growing confidence and strong position that Paul slowly gains throughout the scene, eventually reaching his goal of acquiring money for Daniel in exchange for information he can provide. The second one is a conversation between Daniel Plainview and Paul Dano as his twin brother Eli. And this one very much reacts to how the conversation shifts and the resulting tension between the characters in the scene. At first, it includes the main 3 characters with a relatively wide angle shot. It includes Paul, Daniel, and Abel, with Daniel primarily focusing his attention on Abel, as Daniel is trying to persuade Abel to sell him his land. However, this focus from Daniel and the camera's focus shifts when Eli reveals his knowledge about the oil that his land currently has, pushing the camera closer on him and shifting the focus onto both him and Daniel, removing Abel from the scene. And it finally pushes even closer when Daniel asks Eli what he wants out of this money that he's going to get, asking a personal question designed to reveal the core motivation of Eli's character. But what I really want to talk about is this scene, which I think won him the Oscar. And it's this scene right here, roughly halfway through the film, and it's by far the biggest set piece. It starts off slow with the pump working, panning up to HW overlooking the work, and Daniel in the hall quite near but far enough away. The camera slowly moves in on the pump until right up in focus, whereby the gas pipe starts to shake and eventually explodes, with the camera snapping out to a wide shot to where HW flies and crashes into the ground. There's a quick cut to Daniel getting up and running towards the derrick. We switch focus back and forth between Daniel and another unnamed character reacting to and running towards the derrick, who eventually climbs up and rescues HW from the oil spillage.
Put that fire out!
We have long extended shots of HW in Daniel's arms as he rushes to get HW to safety, with a bunch of extras running in the background and the soundtrack getting louder and louder, the scene getting more and more chaotic. We get a series of close-ups between Daniel and HW as he eventually gets him to safety. It is a very intimate moment where all of Daniel's concerns about HW come flooding out until it is interrupted by a quick cutaway to the derrick, which has a pillar of fire erupting from the ground. The situation has escalated from bad to worse, and Daniel has to leave his son temporarily. We cut to a series of wider shots of Daniel hitting the pegs, which are keeping the derrick up, allowing it to eventually collapse under its own weight, though this happens later. The night is descending, the black smoke is filling the air. The derrick is now a monster of flame, consuming everything around it. Funny story, the Coen brothers were also shooting around a similar area when they were doing the pyrotechnic tests for this scene, and the black smoke that was caused from the tests interrupted the shoots of the set on No Country for Old Men, so they had to shut down production for an entire day. The derrick finally collapses with the fire all now that remains. All Daniel can do is stare at the flames, basking in the glory of all of the wealth that he can now acquire. Symbolically letting Fletcher tend to his son, not himself. A shift in the film where now his greed and his ambition starts to take him over. We see a shift away from his son and towards his own ambitions, which eventually consumes him. All we see is his greasy, oiled-up face against the pitch black. His ego, drive, and ambition seems monumental, colossus, bigger than a derrick and bigger than anything in the film. We cut to the crew filling up the box with TNT, cutting to a wider shot with Daniel in its center frame, orchestrating everything that's happening. It ends with a slow close-up on Daniel, victorious, satisfied, delighted with the amount of money that he's about to make. For me, it's how the cinematography and the dialogue and the music all seem to come together in this one scene, which makes it so good that the camera, wherever it's placed, feels like It's in the world and reacting to the world. We're drawn into it rather than getting pulled out of it. We feel like we know exactly what the characters are feeling and what their actions are going to be doing whenever we see them on film. I think one of the ways that you know the cinematography is so astounding is when we can look at what's happening on screen without any music or any dialogue, on mute. A great example of this is when Steven Soderbergh remade Raiders of the Lost Ark in black and white, and I think he dubbed it with some techno music. The point he was trying to make is that the blocking and the cinematography in that film is so good that even with no dialogue and no music, we know exactly what's going on, what the story's telling, the point that's trying to be made, how through blocking and cinematography, we can add so much to the story, what the audience focuses on what, as an audience, we are supposed to feel. I think if you apply the same rules, if you just turn the music off, the dialogue off, and you simply just watch the scene in silence, you know exactly what's going on, what we're supposed to feel, where our attention is supposed to be, and what are the outcomes from this scene. I think we would achieve the same amazing effect. Thank you for watching and listening.